Hannah's fingers flew across the keyboard at a speed that mesmerized everyone around her. Each command was precise, accurate, almost violent in its efficiency. From the back of the room, the IT director's voice exploded in panic and rage. "Who authorized this?" Edward Grant, the company's CEO, responded without taking his eyes off the screen where Hannah was working. "I authorized it." His voice came out controlled, but everyone in the room could feel the tension behind that forced calm. The director pointed at Hannah with disbelief. "She's the barista!" The silence that followed was devastating. Hannah stopped typing. She raised her eyes slowly and looked directly at the man who had just reduced her to a uniform. There was no fear in her gaze, no anger, just a deep exhaustion. Hannah responded with a firm voice. "I was a systems analyst before serving coffee to people who never saw me." On the screen behind her, the words "access blocked" blinked in green. The systems were beginning to respond. The company was being saved by the barista. For the last 3 years, Hannah had served coffee at dozens of meetings, hundreds of cups delivered to hands that never thanked her, thousands of times ignored by people who decided the company's future without imagining she had once been part of that world. She stood up from the chair, still in uniform, and faced the IT director. "Still want me to go back to the cart?" The morning began like all the others. Hannah Brooks woke up at 5:15, exactly 15 minutes before the alarm went off. It was an old habit, from the times when waking up early meant reviewing code before morning meetings. Now it just meant arriving in time to prepare coffee before the executives started arriving. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that was 3 bus rides away from Grant Corp. The walls still had nail marks where her diplomas used to hang. Systems analysis from State University, cybersecurity certifications, everything stored in a box in the closet, along with a life that seemed to have belonged to someone else. The commute to the company took 1 hour and 40 minutes, 3 buses. On the first, Hannah always sat in the same spot by the window. On the second, the world began to change. The buildings got taller, the clothes more expensive, the conversations more important. Fragments about mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, words she understood perfectly, but that were no longer part of her permitted vocabulary. On the third bus, she could already see the Grant Corp building on the horizon. 40 floors of glass and steel reflecting the morning sky. Hannah got off 2 stops early to save 60 cents that would matter at the end of the month. The employee's entrance was in the back, not the imposing revolving door at the front. Hannah entered through a side door, showed her badge to a camera, and went down to the basement where the central kitchen was located. At 7 in the morning, Hannah began preparing the coffee. Not just any coffee, $500 per kilo coffee, imported from specific farms in Colombia. She ground the beans to the exact measure, controlled the water temperature with degree precision, and timed each extraction. Perfection was perfection, regardless of context. At 8:30 at the first meeting of the day, Hannah entered the conference room when everyone was already seated, 6 executives discussing numbers she wasn't supposed to understand. She served the coffee starting from the right. As always, the CEO took the cup without looking. The director of operations murmured something that could have been a thank you. The VP of technology was too busy with his laptop to notice she existed. While serving, Hannah listened. They talked about the new security platform, about the investment in state-of-the-art firewalls. Hannah noticed the flaw immediately, a gap so obvious it was almost embarrassing. They had focused all security on the external perimeter, but left internal access practically unsupervised. It was like building a huge wall around the house but leaving all the doors unlocked. She thought about speaking up, opening her mouth, contributing. But Hannah learned the lesson 3 years ago. Baristas who give opinions about technology are unemployed baristas, so she just finished serving the coffee and left the room in silence. The day continued the same. More meetings, more coffee, more invisibility. Hannah knew each executive's tastes better than she knew her own dreams. Edward Grant liked extra strong coffee, no sugar, always in the same navy blue cup. The financial director wanted 2 packets of brown sugar and exactly 3 fingers of milk. During lunch, Hannah ate in the basement cafeteria, a table in the corner, alone. Around her, other invisible employees like her, cleaning staff, valets, security guards, people who made the company work but who were never invited to the upper floor end-of-year parties. At 6 o'clock, she grabbed her bag and left through the side door. 3 more buses. Another hour and 40 minutes, another day survived. Before sleeping, Hannah opened her old laptop. She spent an hour studying new programming languages, security updates, newly discovered vulnerabilities. She didn't know exactly why she kept doing this. Maybe hope, maybe stubbornness, maybe just because she couldn't let that part of her that still believed she was more than a barista completely die. Hannah closed the laptop, turned off the light. Hannah slept without knowing that in less than 6 hours, everything would change. At 11:43 at night, while Hannah slept, something woke up in Grant Corp's servers. It wasn't a common virus. It was something much more sophisticated, something that had been planted weeks before, patiently waiting for the right moment. Edward Grant was still in the office. At 42 years old, he had built an empire from scratch. 20 years later, he commanded one of the country's largest financial technology companies. Grant Corp processed billions in transactions every day. The first alert was discreet, a notification in the monitoring system, nothing serious, just a file that wouldn't open correctly. The on-call technician investigated, tried some standard solutions. Nothing worked. 10 minutes later, the problem wasn't one file anymore. It was 5, then 15. Then an entire section of the main server. Edward received the call at 11:58. The IT director tried to sound calm, but his voice trembled at the edges. "Mr. Grant, we need you to come to the control center. We have a situation." The control center looked like a science fiction set. 12 enormous screens covering the entire wall, dozens of workstations where technicians typed frantically. Edward entered and felt the weight of all eyes turning toward him, seeking answers he didn't have yet. The IT director, Marcus Chen, was standing before the main screen. "Mr. Grant, we have a coordinated attack. It started 17 minutes ago. We've already lost access to 17% of the main servers." Edward processed the information without allowing panic to show on his face. Type of attack. Marcus hesitated. This was worse than the news itself. "Fails we're still identifying. It's not any known pattern. It seems adaptive. Every time we close one door, it opens 2 new ones." "How long until we contain it?" Silence. The kind of silence that costs careers. "We don't know, sir. We've never seen anything like this." Edward kept his voice firm. "Call everyone, all technicians, all specialists. I want everyone here in 1 hour." In 40 minutes, the room was full. 23 cybersecurity specialists. The company's best, some still in sleepwear. But chaos didn't respect protocols. At 1:15 in the morning, they had lost 32% of the servers. At 1:40, it was 48%. The attack was accelerating. At 2 in the morning, Edward authorized the call to the main investors. The calls were brutal, hard questions, direct demands. How much money was at risk? How long to resolve it? Why wasn't this predicted? Edward didn't have good answers. Just empty promises that it was being resolved. But while he talked on the phone, he looked at the screens and saw the truth. It wasn't being resolved. It was getting worse. At 2:20, they lost access to the backup system. That changed everything. Backups were the safety net. Without backups, there was no way to recover lost data. Marcus Chen tried different approaches: server isolation, protocol changes, reversion to legacy systems. Each attempt failed faster than the previous one. The attack seemed to anticipate every move. At 3 in the morning, Edward called an emergency meeting. Main conference room. All directors, 7 people sat around the mahogany table. The same table where they closed billion-dollar deals. Now maybe the table where they would have to discuss the end. We've lost 57% of the systems. The backups are compromised. The attack continues advancing. I need options. The financial director was direct. How long until we lose everything? Marcus looked at his watch as if consulting a bomb timer. At the current rate, 90 minutes, maybe less. Edward asked the question he was afraid to ask. Is there any chance of reversing this? Marcus wasn't a man of false hopes. Honestly, sir, I don't know. I've never seen anything like this. Edward closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again and went back to being the CEO. Then we keep trying. You have 90 minutes to make a miracle. At 3:45, the situation was unsustainable. 68% of systems compromised. Clients starting to report problems, the kind of failure that becomes a headline, that destroys reputations. Edward was alone now, standing before the window on the 38th floor. Below, the city slept ignorant. He thought about everything he had built, all the sacrifices, and now the company was dying. Edward loosened his tie, considered the real possibility of defeat. That's when he heard the soft sound of wheels on the carpet behind him. Hannah woke up at 3:30 in the morning with her phone vibrating. Message from the company's automated system: emergency Zhao convocation, code red. In 3 years, there had never been a middle-of-the-night Zhao convocation. Something was very wrong. She arrived at Grant Corp at 4:15. The side entrance was open, nervous security guards, the lobby full of people walking hurriedly, executives still in sleepwear. She went down to the basement kitchen. Donna Marisa was preparing coffee at industrial speed. Hannah, thank God. I need you on the 38th floor. Crisis meeting. It's serious. Very serious. Hannah helped load the cart and went up. When the doors opened on the 38th floor, she felt the difference immediately. The normally silent corridor was full of voices, open doors, people running, organized chaos. She pushed the cart toward the main conference room, knocked discreetly. No one heard. Finally, she simply pushed the door and entered. The room was transformed into an operations center. 20 people, maybe more. Edward Grant standing before the window, tie loose. Marcus Chen talking on the phone with a tense expression. Technicians on laptops typing non-stop. Projected graphs showing red numbers. Many red numbers. Hannah began serving coffee. Marcus didn't even notice when she switched his cold cup for a hot one. While serving, Hannah listened. It was impossible not to listen. Words like compromised, unrecoverable, total collapse floated heavy in the air. One of the technicians murmured, "It's a double-layer attack." It infected the logs at the same time as the main systems. Hannah stopped. Her hand froze in the air. She knew that type of attack. She studied it 4 years ago. It was rare, sophisticated, and it needed a specific approach to be contained. She continued serving, passed by Edward Grant, offered the navy blue cup. He took it without looking. A director discussed calling the FBI, whether they should shut everything down, all the right questions. All useless at that moment. Marcus hung up the phone. I just spoke with the country's best cybersecurity specialist. He's in Tokyo. Not before 8 hours. We don't have 8 hours. Edward turned from the window. Then we find another solution. Does anyone have any ideas we haven't tried yet? Silence. That's when Hannah heard it. A technician used the wrong term. Called it a distributed fragmentation attack, when it was clearly lateral mirroring with dependency injection. It seemed like an unimportant detail, but it was fundamental. If they were trying to solve the wrong problem, they would never succeed. Hannah stood behind the cart. The brown uniform weighed on her shoulders. 3 years being invisible, 3 years keeping silent. She could continue serving coffee. Let these intelligent people solve it themselves. It wasn't her problem, but while that rational voice spoke, another older voice spoke too. The voice of Hannah from 4 years ago, the systems analyst, the one who refused to give up. Hannah took a deep breath and spoke. "Excuse me." The voice came out low. "But this isn't a distributed fragmentation attack. It's lateral mirroring with dependency injection." The entire room stopped. 20 pairs of eyes turned to her, to the woman in uniform holding a coffee cart, to the barista who had just corrected specialists using terms that baristas shouldn't know. Marcus Chen was the first to speak. "What did you say?" Hannah felt the weight of the stairs. She could back down, but she didn't. "The attack pattern you described, it's not fragmentation, it's lateral mirroring. The invader created replicas of legitimate accesses and is using them to hide in normal traffic. That's why it seems like he anticipates every move. Because he's seeing everything you see." The silence grew deeper. Edward Grant took 2 steps toward her, looked into her eyes for the first time in 3 years. "And you know this because—" Hannah could have shrunk. "Because before working here serving coffee, I was a systems analyst, cybersecurity specialist. I worked 5 years at TechCore Solutions. I left when the company closed. I sent my resume for an IT position here. Never received a response. I saw the barista position. I accepted because I needed to pay rent. The room processed this information. Surprise, shame, anger at having wasted talent, but mainly hope. Marcus asked, "Can you stop this?" Hannah looked at the screen, saw the patterns, recognized the signatures. "I can try." Edward didn't hesitate. "Give her full access, now." Then looked at Hannah. "Save my company." Hannah rolled up the sleeve of her uniform, walked to the main computer, sat in the chair, rested her fingers on the keyboard, and began to work. Hannah's fingers flew across the keyboard. Each command was precise, accurate. There was no hesitation. It was like watching a pianist execute a piece memorized for years. The first thing she did was completely change the approach. While the team tried to close doors, Hannah opened more, dozens of them, hundreds. She created a labyrinth of false accesses so complex that the attack itself began to get lost. "What are you doing?" Marcus watched without understanding. "You're giving more access." Hannah didn't take her eyes off the screen. "No, I'm giving the illusion of access. Every door he opens now leads to a mirror system, empty, no real data. While he's distracted, I close the real paths. On the screen, The red lines that had been advancing began to waver, to decrease. The attack was confused. Hannah opened another window, started tracking the origin. Found it. It was through the automatic update system. Someone planted malicious code disguised as a security patch. Marcus went pale. That means it was internal. Or someone who had internal access, but that's a problem for later. Now I need to isolate the root code. Edward watched in silence. He built the company on his ability to read people, to identify talent. And yet, he let this woman serve coffee for 3 years. The weight of that irony was almost unbearable. Hannah worked for 15 minutes straight, without stopping, without looking away. The entire room was mesmerized. The attack reacted, felt it was losing ground, made an aggressive move, tried to compromise the last secure servers. It was a desperate move, and Hannah was waiting. She blocked the path in 3 commands, isolated the malicious code, put it in a virtual sandbox where it could continue running without causing real damage. Done. The attack is contained. Hannah finally leaned back in the chair. The systems will start responding in a few minutes. The compromised data is intact. We can restore everything. The room exploded in collective sighs of relief. Executives breathed. Technicians checked their screens, confirming. The red numbers began to turn green. Marcus verified 3 times before believing. It's working. The servers are responding. How did you do this? Hannah closed 2 windows. You were fighting the attack as if it were external, but it was inside, disguised as legitimate traffic. It needed to be treated as an internal infection, not an external invasion. One of the technicians asked, "Why didn't you tell us before about your experience?" Hannah looked at him. There was no anger. "I did. There's a 12-page resume filed in the HR system. I sent it 3 years ago for a junior analyst position. Never received a response, not even an automatic rejection. So I accepted the position they offered me." The silence was of collective guilt, of lost opportunity, of wasted talent. Edward Grant went to Hannah, stood for a moment, then extended his hand. "Hannah Brooks, thank you for saving my company." Hannah shook the hand. It was the first time they had touched in 3 years. "It wasn't your company I saved. It was the thousands of jobs that depend on it, including mine." Edward maintained the gaze. "Your job changed as of now, if you'll accept." Hannah knew what he was going to offer. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But while you think, I need you to stay and help ensure this doesn't happen again." Hannah nodded. But before starting, she said, "Mr. Grant, I'm not an exception. How many other people are in this company doing jobs that don't reflect their potential? How many talents are you wasting?" Edward had no answer, but the question hung in the air. Hannah spent the next 2 hours working with the team, not giving orders but collaborating, explaining her reasoning, teaching techniques she learned in courses paid for with the barista's salary. Marcus approached. "Hannah, I wanted to apologize, personally. For the last 3 years, you didn't even know I existed." "Exactly. And that's the problem. I should have known." "It's not personal, Marcus. It's systematic. You created a company where certain people are seen and others aren't. Individual apologies are a start, but they don't solve the structural problem." Marcus nodded. "You're right. We're going to need to rethink a lot of things." At 6 in the morning, the first rays of sun came through the windows. The city woke up normally. No one would ever know that Grant Corp was minutes away from ceasing to exist. Edward gathered everyone. "I want to thank you for today's work, especially Hannah Brooks, who saved us. But I also want to apologize to her and to everyone for creating a company where we almost lost everything because we weren't paying attention to the right people. He looked at Hannah. Starting today, some things are going to change. Beginning with reviewing all rejected resumes, implementing a program where any employee can propose ideas directly to the board, and creating a culture where talent is recognized, regardless of position. Hannah listened without expression. Promises were cheap. Execution was expensive. And you, Hannah, any position you want is yours. Security Director, IT Leadership, Strategic Consulting. Hannah was silent. Can I give you the answer on Monday? Right now I just want to go home and sleep. Edward laughed. Of course, everyone's off for today with double pay. People started leaving. Hannah shut down the computer, cleaned the keyboard out of habit. Marcus touched her shoulder. Hannah, you don't need to clean anything, and you definitely don't need to push that cart back. Hannah looked at the cart forgotten in the corner. It's a habit. Then develop new habits. And teach me to see people before seeing positions. Hannah left at 7 in the morning, used the front door for the first time in 3 years. The security guard was confused. Miss, the employee entrance is in the back. Not today. Hannah walked right through outside and the city was in motion. Everything normal. Except Hannah was no longer the same. She took an Uber. For the first time in years, she didn't save the 60 cents. At the apartment, she took off the uniform, folded it carefully. She didn't know if she would wear it again. Hannah took a shower, lay down, and slept the sleep of someone who saved billions using only a keyboard and 3 years of silent rage transformed into competence. Hannah woke up at 2 in the afternoon on Friday. She slept almost 6 hours, a luxury she hadn't allowed herself since college. Everything felt simultaneously familiar and completely different. She made regular coffee, not the $500 per kilo coffee. But today this cheap coffee tasted better. Her phone had 17 messages. 3 from Marcus Chen, 2 from Edward Grant, 5 from Tech Core colleagues, 7 from headhunters. Hannah didn't respond to any, not yet. Saturday arrived quiet. Hannah went for a walk without destination, passed by coffee shops and thought about all the coffees she had served, passed by office buildings and thought about how many talents were trapped inside, invisible, waiting for a chance. Sunday was the day of the real decision. Hannah made a list, pros and cons. Return to Grant Corp. Pros, excellent salary. Recognition, chance to change the culture. Opportunity to make a difference. Cons, same people who ignored her. Same structure. Doubt whether the change would be real. Don't return. Pros, dignity of refusing. Other offers. Starting where she'd be valued from the beginning. Cons, leaving work unfinished, abandoning chance for systemic change. Hannah looked at the list for hours. The obvious answer was to refuse, pride, revenge. But the right answer was more complicated. She thought about the other invisible employees, cleaning staff, security guards, assistants. How many had similar stories? If she refused and left, nothing would change. But if she stayed and used this position to force real change, Hannah picked up her phone, typed to Edward Grant, "If I accept, I need carte blanche to reform HR processes, implement opportunity diversity policies, and create a mentorship program for underutilized employees, without interference from the board. Do you accept?" Response in 2 minutes. "I accept. When do you start?" Hannah took a deep breath. "Monday. But I won't accept a director position yet. I want to start as a senior consultant. If I prove my value, promote me later, based on results, not gratitude." You've already proven your value, but I respect your decision. Senior consultant, see you Monday at 9. Hannah put the phone aside, looked at the small apartment, at the folded uniform, at the life she had. She didn't know if she was making the right decision, but she knew she was making her decision. And after 3 years being invisible, that was already progress. The conference room on the 38th floor was different, not physically, but the energy was different. Hannah entered carrying a laptop, no longer a coffee cart. She wore simple business clothes, hair still tied back but differently, more confident. Edward Grant was already there, along with Marcus Chen and the directors, waiting for Hannah's monthly presentation on the internal development program. Good morning. Today I'm going to show the results from the last 6 months, and you're going to see why investing in people was the best decision this company made. Numbers appeared on the screen, not about attacks, numbers about people. 73 employees identified with underutilized skills, 42 already promoted or relocated, 21 in training, 10 who rejected external offers because they finally felt valued. You had an army of talents. You just weren't looking. Hannah changed the slide. Marcos from parking has a master's in financial management. Now he's in controllership. Adriana from reception has a degree in digital marketing. She leads social media. Paolo from night security, programmed in 3 languages. Now he's a junior developer. Edward looked impressed. Retention rate went up 15%. Productivity increased 23%. Just by looking at who was already here. Exactly. You were spending millions recruiting externally when you had gold in-house. The meeting continued. At the end, Edward called Hannah back. It's been 6 months. It's time to discuss that promotion. Director of People and Culture, with corresponding salary, your own office, budget to expand the program, seat on the Executive Council. Hannah didn't respond immediately. She looked out the window. Millions of people working. How many invisible? How many waiting? I accept, but with one condition. Edward laughed. With Hannah, there were always conditions. What? Donna Marisa, my former supervisor. She retires at the end of the year. I want the party to be in the Grand Hall, with all the directors, with a thank you speech from the CEO. She worked here 32 years. She deserves to be seen. Edward extended his hand. Done. Hannah shook it. It wasn't the first time anymore, but it still felt symbolic. 2 worlds meeting, 2 levels of the same company finally equal. In the lobby, she crossed paths with the new barista, a young woman, impeccable uniform, pushing the cart. Her eyes had that mixture of determination and resignation that Hannah knew well. Hannah stopped. Excuse me, what's your name? Marina. Marina, pleasure. I'm Hannah Brooks, Director of People and Culture. She took out a card. If you have any skill, any talent, any dream beyond serving coffee, I want you to come talk to me. I promise I'll listen. Marina took the card with trembling hands. Thank you. Thank you. Hannah nodded and continued. At the door, she looked back. The imposing building, the place where she was making a real difference. She exited through the front revolving door, because now it was her right, and because she would never be invisible again. Hannah Brooks saved a billion-dollar company, not because she had superpowers, but because she had competence and the courage to use it when it mattered. The real lesson isn't about cyber attacks. It's about how many people around you have talents you've never seen because you never asked. How many solutions are being wasted because you only look at titles, not capabilities. Talent doesn't make noise, doesn't come with a banner. Sometimes it arrives in a brown uniform, pushing a cart just waiting for a chance. Never underestimate who seems small in your eyes. Sometimes it's exactly that person who's holding everything together.